What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so back in the 2000s, about 20 years ago, one of the biggest discussions in basketball was who was the better power forward, Kevin Garnett or Tim Duncan. Now you could argue Chris Webber was in the conversation, but really it was these two guys. Who was the better of the two? And I think the consensus now, as their careers have unfolded, the consensus is not only is Tim Duncan the better of the two, but he is the GOAT when it comes to power forwards. But we live in this age now where you have people who are trying to rewrite history for whatever reason. And I can't help but also think that some of this is agenda-based. And, Kevin Garnett is in the media. These guys look out for one another. And, this could be a genuine opinion by Nick Young, but I view a lot of this stuff with suspicion. You know what I'm saying? Whenever I start seeing these these new age opinions that are constantly going against what's been the grain of consensus, all-time greats who are not affiliated with the media or the media, I get a little suspicious. But anyway, Nick Young, former NBA player, was recently on a podcast. And he was asked about who he thought was better between KG and Tim Duncan. And he said KG, and this is what he had to say.
Duncan had more individual and team success than KG during their NBA careers, but just rolling the ball out, do you think KG was a better player than Tim Duncan?
Yes.
And why do you feel that way?
Tim was great, but I feel like just because you got accomplishments and championships don't always mean you're better than that person. To me, I feel like his team was better than the Timberwolves. That's why. But if you put KG on that team, I think he had the same amount of rings.
If you put KG on that team, they don't miss a beat.
Yeah.
But I think if you put Tim with the Minnesota team, he get them out of the first round and shit like that.
Ooh. We know if Garnett was in that system,
Oh my God.
he would have been the greatest power forward of all time.
Everybody
we can say that.
Look, man. People can have their opinions on this. And I know what it is. Like, part of it is like, when we think of Kevin Garnett, we think of like his athleticism, his versatility. He was more exciting to watch. But to me, Tim Duncan, while his style could be a little bit boring, if you're a basketball fan and you like the actual skill set of a power forward, traditionally at least, he wasn't boring to watch. But to the casual NBA fan, he could be a bit, I guess, soporific to watch. But I enjoy watching Tim Duncan. I thought he was stoic. I thought he was quiet, the unsung leader. But while you could argue maybe Kevin Garnett had a better small window peak, maybe 2002, 2005. You could argue that, 2006. But Kevin Garnett, I thought that he should have still, even with not having the comparable talent around him, I still thought that he should have took those teams out of the first round and made the playoffs more often. And don't forget, he did play with Stephon Marbury. So it's not true that he didn't play with some talent around. There was some years he had Latrell Sprewell. There was some years that he had, what was his name? Wally Zerbiak. You know, he had some years where he had some talent with him, but you know, they couldn't get past the Lakers or whatever. I get that part, but he still should have made the playoffs more. And I agree with what Kenyon Martin said. Yeah, okay, you could say that if he played under Greg Popovich, oh, this could have happened and that could have happened, maybe. But I do think, yeah, if you put Tim Duncan on those Timberwolves teams, they would have made the playoffs more consistently. Absolutely. So while Kevin Garnett was a little bit better at filling out the box, the box score and the stat sheet, Tim Duncan, I would say, was more fundamentally sound and a better offensive player. Bank shots, you know what I'm saying? Being able to finish with both hands around the basket and elite defense. You could argue he should have won a Defensive Player of the Year. He was a great rebounder, and he was bigger and stronger, and that matters. Garnett was great, but Garnett was not what you would call, even though he did score 26,000 points, he was not a low post dominating presence. He wasn't like a dude that you get the ball and he's going to back you down and he's going to do a whole bunch of damage. Tim Duncan was a beast who played in a system that actually hurt his overall numbers, because had he played on a bad team, quite honestly, his numbers would have been even better. Had he came into the NBA playing with the Timberwolves, because remember, he was NBA ready. Garnett wasn't. Garnett came out of high school, so you had to wait 4 years or 3 or 4 years for him to develop. Tim Duncan was NBA ready from the get-go. He won Rookie of the Year. He won a championship his second year before Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker got there. You know what I'm saying? With Avery Johnson as the point guard. You know what I'm saying? Like, people can say what they want to say. I'm not trying to knock Avery Johnson, but he wasn't exactly the best point guard. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, if you put Tim Duncan, I think, on those Timberwolves teams, not in the Popovich system, and the teams relying on him, honestly, I think he would have won a couple of scoring titles. And I sincerely believe that. Remember, scoring was a little bit lower then. So, yeah, 99, 2000, he could have won the scoring title averaging 27, 28, 29, 30. Sure. And, the thing is this. Garnett and the Celtics, no matter how you want to look at it, underachieved. That team could have three-peated. Now, Garnett got hurt in 2009, fine. But that team, as much as they talk, as much as they bark, you think they three-peated, or at least repeated. Tim Duncan had probably, I would say it was, the greatest success as a player in the history of the NBA. For 19 years, the Spurs were a totally different franchise. They were an elite franchise. And Tim Duncan adapted to changes in styles, changes in NBA rules, the style of play, whether it was a 77-75 grounded out half-court defensive type ball game, or when the NBA became more free-flowing and open, Tim Duncan was effective. Whether he had to lose weight and, adjust to the NBA when it became more perimeter orientated, he did that. And the Spurs stayed successful. Hell, he won a championship, 2 years before he retired. And you could argue, if Manu Ginobili ain't forget who his teammates were in 2013 and throwing all those darn turnovers around, they could have beaten the Miami Heat in 2013. If Ray Allen hit that shot, he would have 6 championships. He'd be 6-0. And as soon as Tim Duncan retires, you know, the Spurs were on their way down. And they had Kawhi Leonard, of course, but after that, the Spurs have been absolutely doo-doo. You know? So at the end of the day, I understand what people are saying, but it's Tim Duncan, man. Because like I said before, Garnett should have still took those Timberwolves teams to the playoffs more often than he did. Now, as far as this GOAT power forward conversation, I think it's Tim Duncan, but I also want to argue that people have to throw in Bob Pettit in this conversation. Okay? Throw in Bob Pettit. Because Bob Pettit is like being forgotten. And it kind of ticks a lot of us off, man. But anyway, 5 championships to 1. What is it? 3 finals MVPs to none for Garnett. He has more accolades. I don't know. Whatever. It's Tim Duncan, man. That's just my opinion, man. Tell me what you guys think.